Hi, my name is Guy Lawrence, and thanks for tuning into my podcast today. If you're enjoying these conversations and you want to check out more of this transformational work, be sure to come back to guylawrence.com.au and join me as we go further down the rabbit hole. Enjoy the show. Live. I think we're actually on Facebook Live.
Yeah, I'm scared of people.
Fantastic. Yes, I've just checked. I've been noting on Facebook, and I can now see that we are streaming live. Beautiful. And I just want to say, for anyone that sees this Facebook Live, skipping through their news feed for the next, whenever, there's a bunch of links below this interview because this will be put into a podcast format over the next few days. So I appreciate social media can be quite transient. But for those that don't know me, my name is Guy Lawrence, and I have a regular podcast every week. And over the weekend, I definitely had the feeling and need to invite Bill Bennett onto my podcast show. And I wanted to do something a little bit different and actually stream it live today. And this awesome gentleman certainly agreed to come on. So it's an honor and a privilege to have you on my podcast today, Bill. So thank you for coming back on my show, mate.
That's sweet of you, Guy. Thank you. It's lovely to be back.
And with, I guess, all this uncertainty at the moment with everything that's been happening around the world, I just felt a strong urge to ask you to come on because you've obviously been delving into the topic of fear over the last 12 months while you're currently making your new movie. And it just resonated so much. I thought, who better person to come on and actually share some of their discoveries so we can have a grounded level conversation around fear and actually how we can empower ourselves in these uncertain times. So I think that'll be a great place to start, Bill. How has the last 12 months been for you, and what have you been doing, and what have you discovered?
Well, crikey, it's been quite amazing, Guy, because when I set off, of course, I never ever thought that something like this would happen. I was interested in looking at fear because I've made a film, as you know, on intuition called PGS. And one of the things that I learned from that film was that one of the biggest blockages to intuition is fear. And when I started to think about that, I thought, well, what is fear and how does it work and how can we manage it? Because it's such an all-pervading, is it an emotion or a feeling, or I don't quite know what it is really. But and so that really set me off. And then, so for the last 12 months, I've been really going backwards and forwards to America and to other places to interview experts on fear, included. I just read out some of the people. Well, I just recently came back from America where I interviewed Dr. Joe Dispenza, Dr. Bruce Lipton, Carolyn Mace will be in the film. But some extraordinary interviews. I've got James Van Praagh, Dr. Lissa Rankin, who's written a book called The Fear Cure. She's very, very popular. Extraordinary lady named Austin Wells, or Foster Gamble, who did the Thrive movie. I mean, I've got now over 30 interviews and probably about 50 hours of material. But it was really funny, when I sat down to do the interview with Joe Dispenza, and I mentioned to him that I'd done 30 interviews. And while I was setting up for the interview and he was putting the mic on and so forth, he said, well, what have you learned? And I sat back and I went, crikey, what have I learned? Because it's such a complex thing. And it wasn't easy to sort of say to Joe, and I'm allowed to call him Joe, by the way, now, say to him exactly what I've learned. But one of the things that I have learned is this, and that is that there is real fear and there is imagined fear. And real fear is survival fear, and it inhabits the body. Imagined fear is illusory fear, and it inhabits the mind. And one of the things that both Joe Dispenza and Bruce Lipton talk about is the fact that we are incapable of separating, our bodies are incapable of separating what is real fear and what's imagined fear. So that was one of the really big takeouts I've got from the years I've done so far.
Yeah, and I think that's the key, isn't it? Is that if we don't actually know the difference between real fear and perceived fear, in any given moment, in any given time, then that's, for me, is a great place to start looking and actually start to get bring a leveled approach into the topic, because fear feels like fear. No matter how big the trauma is outside or what is actually going on, the body receives it the same way.
Well, exactly. That's what Bruce Lipton is really on about. You know, he says that biochemically, your body can't differentiate between real fear and imagined fear. You know, so you wake up in the middle of the night and you worry about your finances. That really is imagined fear. But your body can't distinguish that. You can distinguish that from the fear that you might feel when you're directly under threat. If somebody comes into that bedroom at night and puts a gun to your head, that's survival fear. You know, so the body can't differentiate, and so chemically it reacts to that fear in the fight or flight way that evolution-wise we've been geared to react. Okay, so when we were earlier in our evolution, fear was an important warning and response system to very direct real fear. In other words, a tiger's going to jump out of a cave and eat me alive. And so what happens is the body reacts with adrenaline and other chemicals, and to give you the capacity to run away or to attack your attacker. But when we've got imagined fear, those same chemicals are running around your body, but you're not fighting off a saber-toothed tiger or a T-Rex or something like that. And that's where the damage occurs. That's where the biological damage occurs, because the thing is, we hold that imagined fear for a long, long time. Our body's response to real fear was only ever meant to be short-lived. In other words, we were only ever programmed to have a fear response that was very short-lasting, on the assumption that we would either run away from the threat or get consumed by the threat. So, but what's happening now is that our bodies are living with this fear day in, day out, and that's what's causing so much illness and so forth.
Yeah. Do you think if we are conditioning ourselves to live with more fear in our lives on a daily basis in society, that we then tend to continue to look for fear in our lives on a daily basis? So we continue to sort of stay in those states from a biological perspective. Have anyone talked to that?
Yeah, Bruce Lipton talks about that, and so does Joe Dispenza. Fear begets fear. And one of the things that I put to a lot of the people that I interviewed is, do we attract what we fear the most? And it's a very, very interesting concept. And the overwhelming response I got from all the interviews that I did was that yes, we do. We bring forward, in the same way that the spiritual laws of attraction can bring us, bountiful things. It also works with fear. If we put the intention out there to be afraid of something, we're going to bring that to us. And like I say, that then has quite devastating effects on us from a health point of view.
Totally. So with the current crisis that's going on with the coronavirus right now, and obviously there's a lot of fear happening in this moment. What have you learned from this so far, from the last 12 months? And then obviously there's a bigger thing that's going on right now. But as an individual, we still have to deal with something that's beyond our control in this moment. So your relationship with fear, from your learnings, how have you been bringing that into these times like this, when we need it most, when we fear most?
Well, it's a really, really good question, Guy. And I'm not. It's such a sort of a multiple response thing, but
Totally, I know.
But let me just start off by saying, the first thing you got to do is you've got to identify your fear. You've got to. I put it as the five F's of fear. You've got to feel it. You've got to find it. you've got to face it, you've got to friend it, and then you've got to free it. So the first thing you've got to do is you've got to find exactly what your fear is, and that requires some level of self-analysis. And then you've got to face it. So in other words, there's no point putting your head in the sand and saying it's going to go away, because the fear will stay with you. You've actually got to confront your fear, and you've got to find it. You've got to see exactly what it is. I'm afraid that I'm going to go broke. I'm afraid of dying. I'm afraid that my mother is going to die. And then what you've got to do is you've got to go back to your real fear versus imagined fear. And you've got to determine whether it is a very real fear or whether it's an imagined fear. And that, once again, requires a fair level of sort of very, very truthful sort of self-analysis. Because a lot of the fear that you do hold, you will find, if you dig right back, is illusory. To give you an example, you know, a lot of people are scared of getting sick with the coronavirus. Well, there's a very real chance that they will get sick. But there's also a very real chance that their sickness will be mild and that it will pass relatively quickly and they'll come out of it unscathed. Key to this is having information. What I call. I wrote a blog yesterday. Oh, and by the way, Facebook is starting to censor me. I wrote a blog yesterday called "We Are at War," and I got a Facebook message today saying we're taking this down because it's inappropriate content. And then I got a Facebook message saying a post that I put up from Bloomberg.com, was inappropriate comment. All I did was repost the story. And the story said that Wuhan doctors are telling the rest of the world what they're doing wrong. So Facebook is starting to censor me, and this is really worrying. We can get onto this later on as to what the longer term ramifications of this virus are doing, in a geopolitical sense. But getting back to this thing about facing your fear of dying. Now, it's one of the things that I asked all the interviewees when I was going for the last 12 months. I asked them about what is the greatest fear that people hold. And one of the greatest fears is, of course, fear of dying. And that's what this virus is really asking us to look at very, 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 very closely. How do we feel about death? How do we feel about dying? How do we feel about one of the people that we love, our children or our grandparents or our friends, dying? It's really quite confronting. Okay, so the next one is, and this is the really interesting one, and this is a result of a long interview with Professor Richard Schwartz. Professor Richard Schwartz is one of the world's top psychologists. He's an adjunct professor at Harvard, but he's developed a system called the internal family system dealing with trauma. And if people want to Google him, he's the most extraordinary man. But one of the things he says as part of this internal family systems process is that you've got to befriend your fear. Now, when I spoke to him in the interview about this was really confusing thought to me. How can you befriend fear? But what he says is that you've actually got to look at your fear as being something. I mean, he says you've got to personalize it. You've got to dress it up in clothes and give it a name, and and each fear is different, and each fear will have different clothes and different names. And we have multiple fears, of course. But what he says is that as you befriend your fear, you get to know it, and you become familiar with it, and your fear becomes familiar with you. And in that process, it loses its sting, it loses its potency. And he said, you've got to understand that your fear is there for a purpose. It's there to warn you. It's there to guide you. It is actually there to help you. And when you start to look at fear in that way, that it's not something that's trying to shut you down, but something that in fact is trying to help you, then you can start to make plans to get you out of a situation. It's an interesting thought, isn't it?
It is. It actually takes me back to a moment literally about 2 months ago because I'm fearful of spiders.
Oh yeah, me too. I hate them.
And with everything I teach and what I do, and looking at the autonomic nervous system and actually trying to bypass that because we have these automated fearful responses. We had this spider just wandering to our living room one evening, and it was about the size of my hand, this huntsman. And you either run, you either freeze, or well, I froze in that fear response, and we couldn't catch it, and it ran off and it managed to get into the cupboards next door in our spare room where we keep a lot of our clothes, and I knew he was in there, and we work from there, and I'm just like, oh dear, we've got this spider. So what we decided to do, we actually started to confront it and say we have a pet spider. We actually named him Bruce. And at the moment we started to do that and sort of lean into it, it really did soften the whole relationship with this spider. And I was accepting that he was in here, and I was thinking, Bruce is in here, that's okay, he's not going to, and then I was actually looking at the very realism of what it was and bypassing my emotions. And then Bruce finally showed himself about a week later right in front of me. And I was able to get the Tupperware, pick him up. I wasn't brave enough to use my hands. And then I released him outside and I give him a blessing and I said, here you go, Bruce, out you go. And it's a really important lesson for me.
Guy, I've got to say, the way you handle that whole situation with Bruce really is a perfect way that people can handle fear. And you talked about leaning into it. That's one of the things that came through in the interviews that I did. I said, well, should we try and rid ourselves of fear? Should we try and just get rid of fear altogether? And the responses I got back were, no, you can't, and it's not helpful to do that anyway. I mean, you've got to, and they use this term, lean into it and work with it and use it and see it as something that is there to benefit you. And in the same way that you did with the spider with Bruce, I mean, you can take it the next step and go, well, Bruce has got a life, he's got to feed, he's got to have insects or little things. I mean, you and I both know it's an imagined fear because huntsmen can't hurt you, really. They're not poisonous spiders, but they look really scary.
That's right.
So in fact, your little episode with Bruce is a sort of a perfect case study of how to handle fear.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we had feel it and then find the fear.
Feel it, find it, face it, friend it, and then free it. And by free it, I mean in the same way that you freed the spider. The spider is there, it's in the garden, it might well come back into your room, but it's not an issue with you anymore because you've gone through that whole process of naming it and getting comfortable with it. And, every single interviewee, I ask one question, and probably that question is germane to our current situation with the coronavirus. And that question was this: all right, you've got a young mum, a single mother, she's in her early 20s, she's got 2 kids, she loses her job, what advice would you give her? And, she's beset by fear when she loses her job, and she's got these young kids, what advice would you give her? And I got a whole bunch of different responses, I've got to say. But the one overriding thing that came through was this. First thing she's got to do is she's got to stop. She's got to breathe. She's got to take stock of her situation. She's got to look for family and others around her to support her. And then she's got to, in a very clear-minded way, she's got to work out what resources are available to help her, what government resources there might be, and so forth. In other words, she's got to be quiet. She's got to put fear aside totally, and look at it very logically and analytically. Work out a plan, and then work to that plan. And I think the same thing really applies with the coronavirus. Is that people have got to ask themselves, what am I really scared of? I mean, this whole thing with toilet paper, for instance, is really interesting. I mean, as most people know, there's been a huge run on toilet paper. And I've been thinking about this a lot, and I go, why? Because it really doesn't make much sense. But it is an expression of fear. And more than that, it's an expression of, well, if I get a roll of toilet paper, then I'm doing something to protect myself and my family. I think it's not so much about the toilet paper as such, but it's about assuaging the fear that's coursing through a lot of people at the moment. Yeah.
It is fascinating. You know, just something that I wanted to share, which I've never shared before, and looking at these circumstances and these interesting times. And, you know, I think we've all faced crises in the past, you know, whether it be personal or on a bigger scale at this moment. And being able to look back on some things in my own life, any time where I've felt like a huge amount of pressure, that it's almost like everything is caving in around, and there's no wriggle room. There's always revealed something within me that I didn't even know that I had an ability to cope with from that. And it was the moment I was able to kind of look at things and accept things for the way they are in this moment right now. It was only from that point forward that I was able to deal with the situation with a much more level-headed mind. And I think acceptance was a huge part for me in that.
Well, you know, it's interesting because whilst I think it's important to keep us apolitical, but I do think our governments have let us down, and I think they're continuing to let us down. And so what that means is that we have to be more self-reliant, and we have to start to make decisions for ourselves, because we can't trust the politicians at the moment are making the right best decisions. Guy, this is unprecedented. This is survival. This is global survival. And, you know, other than perhaps the Spanish flu in 1918, there's never been anything like this before. You know, so we're all in new territory. The stock market has crashed. People with their money invested in the stock market are probably terrified right now. People are going to be losing their jobs hand over fist. People are going to get sick. People are going to die in unprecedented numbers, and that's scary. You know, we've never faced anything like this before. So how do you deal with that? Well, the first thing you've got to do is you've got to, you know, just like the advice to that young mum, you've got to stop and you've got to take stock of things and figure out what you need to do to protect yourself. I wrote this blog about We're at War, and I likened it to a military campaign where you've got to find allies. You've got to find people who are going to support you. You've got to find, you know, I've found that during this time, my wife Jennifer and I have got so much closer to our family. You know, because we've had to. We care about them, they care about us. We're communicating more. There are actually going to be some positives come out of this, even though people may not see it at the moment. There will be extraordinary positives, and we can get onto that later. But coming back to death, this is a big one, and I think what's happening now is it's asking all of us to look death very much straight in the face and work out, what is my relationship to death?
Yeah.
I mean, I know what my relationship is to death.
Yeah, you know, it's for me what comes through for me right now is, you know, I always remember a famous quote by Wayne Dyer, and to fully live life, you have to fully accept death, and it's in that transition then you start to truly live. And I think quite, and I can only speak from my own experience here, but there was a large part of my life where I didn't realize it, but I was continuously resisting to things and making decisions based upon a fear-based approach to my life. And then it wasn't until I actually did some of my own inner work and actually put myself in situations to overcome my own fears, and those fears become so real that I felt like I was going to die in some respects. But actually doing that inner work for myself and really looking at that and creating a different relationship, it certainly gave me a greater strength and a different resolve and a different relationship to life. And it's from that place that it was allowing me to open my heart more, to live with more compassion, to live with more connection to the people around me and to the things that I do, and bring intent that would actually benefit and help others and serve on a bigger picture. And as I started to come through from that place, in that lens in which I looked at life, it became more moment by moment. It became to try and find the truth in all of it, and try and distinguish what's real fear and what isn't real fear, just like it's happening right now in the world. And then being able to still come from that place with awareness in my heart, as well as just in the programming and in the mind that can actually just kicking. And I felt fear. I feel fear creeping every day at the moment, but it's been from that work and that relationship of what you speak about, and having to look at death, because it's not a topic we quite often talk about, to be honest with you.
No, it's not. And the coronavirus is requiring us to talk about it. Let me ask you a question, because I asked myself this question this morning. Okay, let's say we've got a situation where we've got more people requiring ventilators and ICU beds than there are available. And you are about to go into ICU, but there is a young person who also is waiting to go into ICU, but there's a strong possibility that person is not going to get a bed. Would you give up your bed for that person?
That's a very difficult question. I have a wife that's 6.5 months pregnant right now, and I'm bringing a child into this world as well, And there's a great fear for me as being a father for the first time in these situations as well. But I certainly wouldn't want to ignore the situation either. But I've never dealt with these moments in that.
These are life and death moments. I mean, these are questions that we have to ask ourselves. And that's. I mean, in a sense, we're in this extraordinarily privileged situation, in that we are seeing humanity. We're being forced to see humanity in a way that we've never seen it before. Never. And I mean, it's absolutely unique. People are going to be, historians are going to be looking at this hundreds of years down the track if we survive it. It might be from another planet. But it's asking us to two big questions. Who am I, and what's important? What's important to me? They're the two big questions as far as it's asking us to confront. And, prior to this, we've all been getting on with our life. We've all been living day to day. We've taken so many things for granted. Suddenly those things we can't take for granted anymore. We can't take for granted that we can walk into a supermarket and buy some mints, These basic kind of human needs that we have, we're suddenly looking at through a new prism. And I'll tell you, I think we're possibly going to go on to what the benefits are later on of, this whole
Absolutely.
thing. But one of the benefits for me is that in the last 2 weeks I've dropped 3 kilos. I've already started rationing my food, So, okay, that's a little bit specious, but
Yeah. No. There's always.
But you got to laugh as well, Guy. I mean, really, we do have to keep our sense of humour through this. I'm not suggesting that everybody. I mean, I heard in Berlin they're holding corona parties, coronavirus virus parties. You know, they're going out and they're partying till well into the morning. That just makes no sense to me.
Yeah, yeah. What do you think moving forward we can do to, I guess, keep ourselves in check? Even if we were recapping the things that we've covered, and to give people something to take away from this conversation today, with what's the relationship that we have with our fear right now. We're in these extraordinary times, and what we can do to just deal with it on a daily basis to the best of our ability, so we can feel empowered. Because there's also a lot of, the one thing that I find every time I log into social media, that, you know, there's so many different views, different opinions, different messages that are happening, that are creating different emotions in me every single moment, you know?
Well, one of the things that you've got to do is you've got to sort through all the hysteria and the panic and go and try and find the baseline facts of the situation. Because, once again, going back to the military metaphor, if you've got good intel, then you can then make plans accordingly. And one of the plans at the moment when you're under attack is to defend, put up protections around yourself. And it seems to me from all the experts that one of the big protections is to start to embrace social distancing, self-isolation if you can. Just stay away from other people as much as you can. We brought our son in from Sydney. We live in a country town outside of Sydney, and perhaps we've been overreacting a little bit, but he's been in his room for the last 3 days, self-isolating, just to make sure that he hasn't brought a bug in from Sydney that we're not aware of and he's not aware of. You know, so I think finding what the real situation is, not what the hysteria is very, very important, and then start to make plans accordingly. Once you've got a plan worked out, and you start then to implement that plan, it's amazing how much fear drops away, because you're doing something. You're doing something, and you're facing your fear in a very practical and logical way. I think the other really important thing is this: we talked about real fear and imagined fear, but let's also talk about what you can control and what you can't control. You know, because there's no point being fearful over things you can't control. And there's a whole lot with this virus that we can't control. You know, so we need to go through, once again, a real sort of logical, analytical process of working out what it is we can control, what it is we can't control. And let's take anger out of this whole situation, because I know a lot of people are very angry about China or about the governments or about politicians or about various things. That's not going to suit. That's not going to help us. Being angry is not going to help us. It's a wasted emotion. It's a wasted energy. Let's channel that energy into something very positive, what we can do and how we can help others. You know, because the other thing that this virus is asking us to do is it's asking us to be generous, be compassionate, be humane, and help other people.
Yeah, it certainly, hopefully, will certainly unite us and remind us what actually really matters.
Exactly. You've got to understand that fear contracts and hope, and I put love into that basket of hope, expands. And what we need to do is we need to move into expansion mode, because whilst it seems really dire at the moment, we can't see a way out of this, there will be extraordinary opportunities for growth, for creativity that will come as a result of this, and for enterprise as well. We can't see that right at the moment, but there will be. And we've just got to keep in that expansion mode, keep hope alive, keep love alive, and expand.
Absolutely. I think just to wrap this up, Bill, for today's conversation, can you recap the 5 F's for me, please, so people can start to even take that note down and write it? Because honestly, the one thing I practice on a daily basis, and I have done for years, and it serves me hugely in times like this. Is I actually have a practice of gratitude on a daily basis, and from that gratitude practice, I actually feel into my heart and the emotions that, and I actually count my blessings and feel and be grateful for the very things that I have in my life right now. The very fact that we can still get on this call and have this conversation and hopefully help inspire someone else as well. It's quite amazing, the things that we have from that. And by actually really reminding myself of what matters, it allows me to sort of show up each day and keep moving forward, you know.
Well, that's an expression of you working out what's important, and that once again is you are really sort of working through your real fear versus imagined fear. The 5 Fs, and I've been working on this for a little while, and in fact I've gone to many of the interviewees and checked it with them to see whether or not this is, you know, I should be sort of categorizing it this way, and I've got approval from them to do it. But basically it's feel your fear, find it. And that's actually find it in your body. Actually physically find out where your fear is actually sitting in your body. Sometimes in your heart, sometimes in your gut, sometimes in your head. But actually find out physically where it is, where your fear actually resides. Then face it. So once you've found it, you then have to face your fear and bring it out of its dark little recess and in the cold, harsh light of day, face it. People at the moment who are ignoring this virus aren't facing their fear. Okay, once you've faced it, then, and this is the tricky one to wrap your head around, but it's really crucial to the whole way of mitigating fear, is to friend it. Realize that it's there to help you, that it has a purpose, and that if you find out what that purpose is, it is in fact your friend. And in becoming your friend, it actually loses its venom. It becomes toothless. It becomes less of a threat, and then free it. But by free it, we talked about leaning into it. So you're never actually going to be free of your fear, but you have acknowledged that your fear is something that can help you. And if you work with it and lean into it, then you can use that that biological warning system that fear is. You can use it then to make plans and to put into action those things that can help you.
Yeah, that's just beautiful, Bill. That's so empowering. 5Fs, and it's something we can't forget. It's very easy acronym for sure.
Five F's of fear.
Yeah, but it takes practice. You have to physically do it and sit there and feel into your body, breathe into your body, give yourself the space and time to allow that communication and that connection to happen. It's not.
Well, by the way, Guy, there was a wonderful acronym that I picked up while making the film, which I've decided not to use. In fact, I was thinking of actually calling the film this, but the acronym is this: fear is fuck everything and run.
Exactly. It's a much more truthful one than false evidence of being real, which is the
absolutely.
Yeah. When can we expect the film out, Bill? Like, is it anytime soon? Where are you at with it, mate?
Well, look, I've actually now finished all the filming. I do need to do a little bit of. If anybody saw PGS, my film on intuition, there was a lot of drone shots and stuff like that. I was going to do that. But Guy, what I'm thinking is that there is a very real need for the content that I've collected in these films, and I'm actually thinking of putting all of the interviews, all the 30 interviews, up online, so that people can, and it'd be raw, so it wouldn't be as filmed as such. It'd be almost like, you know, the raw footage that I've got, which are largely conversations with these extraordinary people about fear and how best to handle fear. And I'm thinking I've just got to call my web designer and talk about the possibility of actually putting up 30 interviews, something like 50 hours of material on fear, which people can access, because I think there's a need for this kind of information at the moment. What I worry about is that the suicide rate is going to be huge. And I think there's going to be a lot of people are going to, once the initial shock of this and the reaction to it is over and people take stock of their circumstances, I think we're going to be dealing with extraordinary issues of mental health and suicide. And, we in this business of transformation, and personal transformation, if you like, we have got to try and find ways to help people. That's our role in this current situation. We've got to find ways to help people. And it just so happens I'll be making a film on fear. And, I'd like to try and get that information out there.
If people want to learn more about when that will be uploaded to your website and everything else, where can we send everyone, Bill, so they can just stay communicating with you and keep their finger on the pulse?
Yeah, good question. I'm so low tech. Sometimes I really should have this worked out, but Facebook, I'm pretty prominent on Facebook.
Okay.
And also that is unless they shut me down. And also, look, if people just Google me,
Bill Bennett, they'll find you. I found you very easily.
Absolutely.
You're everywhere. Bill, look, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, and thank you for doing this on Facebook Live. I've never done anything like this before on Facebook Live. It's magic, and I'll certainly be looking into doing the podcast more like this in the future as well. But I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate everything you're doing and sharing the wisdom that you learned, and hopefully people that have tuned in and listened today would have definitely got something from that. I know I certainly did. That's for sure. So thank you.
The most important takeout from this whole thing has been your story about Bruce.
Yeah.
The spider. That was fantastic.
Absolutely. Yeah, I haven't seen him in a while, so hopefully he hasn't made his way back in, but that's all right. Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, Guy.